Christmas time is here again. I hope you all joined me on Christmas Eve leaving out blue milk and warm cookies for George Lucas. Oh, I should have said blue milk and warm Wookiees. I guess I can do that next year. And as we simultaneously celebrate the holiday season and anticipate the arrival of Boba Fett to our television screens, I'm reminded of 1978 when we were in quite a similar situation. I say we, I wouldn't be born for another 22 Christmases. But the similarity prompted me to investigate the history of crossover between Star Wars and the holidays. It's a subject that's always interested me, and I think it deserves more attention. So come on, gather round the fire, because I'd like to dive into why. Obviously, Christmas doesn't exist in Star Wars. The virgin birth that may have eventually been commemorated ended up causing a few too many murders for that. But that hasn't stopped Yuletide cheer infiltrating the galaxy far, far away on more than one occasion. Let's start with the big one, and the first one, the Star Wars Holiday Special. We've all heard of this one. It was a television special released in November 1978, cashing in on the cultural phenomenon of the original Star Wars film the year before. And it was something of a phenomenon itself, although not in the same way. The most important thing I'd say about it is that if you haven't seen it, you absolutely should. We've all heard people talk about it, we've seen the screenshots and the clips, and we think we have a pretty good understanding of what it is. But trust me, unless you actively sit down and watch it from start to finish, you have no idea. This isn't gatekeeping. It's not, oh, you're not a real fan if blank, etc. It's just that this thing is so indescribably bizarre that it genuinely has to be seen to be believed. I think the main thing that a lot of people don't realise about it is that it's an hour and 40 minutes long. The highlights, the details that get turned into memes, make up about 10 minutes. And then there's the other meaningful content that could probably take up another half an hour. The rest is just padding. This all goes on for so long.
It's still going. They have dial-up.
I recently sat down and watched it all with Tom from my podcast. I'd seen it years ago and he was experiencing it for the first time, but we both underwent a similar descent into madness. Our reaction to it is up on the Diving Into Why YouTube channel, but it was honestly quite hard to find anything to say that was funnier than the discombobulating shit show that was unfolding in front of us. The most telling reactions we had were the long moments of stunned silence, because isn't that what every Christmas film is aiming to elicit? Or I guess this is actually a Life Day film. Although a lot of this happened far from the oversight and influence of George Lucas, I think he had some pretty strict rules about Earth holidays appearing in his universe. So they're celebrating the Star Wars equivalent holiday, Life Day, which I guess is both Christmas and Thanksgiving. But yeah, this is a Christmas film at its core. The story centers around Chewbacca trying to make it home in time for his family's Life Day celebrations, which definitely could be a good premise. Han and Chewie traveling across the galaxy on a mission to get home sounds like fun. It's such a good idea that it actually was the premise of a comic a year later. But for an on-screen story, it probably would have meant having more VFX shots than just the recycled A New Hope ones we see throughout. So instead, we spend the majority of the runtime with Chewbacca's family, waiting for our hero to return. We have his wife Mala, his father Itchy, and his son Lumpy, and I hate all of them. The best thing they do is showcase how the original Star Wars film got Chewbacca just right, how any adjustment to his design could have led to catastrophically terrifying consequences. The same goes for his voice. It's alien and animal enough without being ear-piercing or irritating. Unfortunately, this wonderful balance was not found for his family. Nor did they really seem to understand what made the character work. He was the one alien in a crew of humans. He spoke Shriwook and Han understood, and Han would either translate to the others or respond in a way that made the content of Chewie's line obvious. When you've got three Wookiees in a room together, speaking their own language with no one to interpret or even bounce off, it becomes a form of psychological torture. And that exact thing makes up the majority of the special. The start especially is like 20 uninterrupted minutes of screeching and growling at each other as they wait for Chewbacca to come home. This opening sets the bar really low, to the point where whenever literally anyone shows up or anything else happens, it feels like a treat. But it's never for very long, because this family is used as the framing device for every other segment. It never cuts away to another side of the galaxy, to other people, or to a variety act. To get to those things, it's always that our main Wookiee characters are watching them on their various pieces of entertainment technology, even when that means that Lumpy watches a Star Wars cartoon starring his dad. But that is somehow not even the weirdest thing that a Wookiee watches. A friend of the family shows up to give some Life Day gifts, and gives Itchy a fucking VR porn machine. I'd heard people talk about this and assumed it was an exaggeration, but it's not really.
Oh, we are excited, aren't we?
It's such an appropriate thing to give an old man for Christmas, and such an appropriate thing for him to watch in the middle of the living room, and such an appropriate thing to put in a fucking Star Wars holiday special for kids. Luckily, it doesn't take long for the lady to stop moaning and start singing, and that's a welcome bit of relief. There are some other musical performances and a holographic Cirque du Soleil. None of it is particularly memorable or good, but it is all better than watching the Wookiees. The best bit is probably the B. Arthur Mos Eisley sequence, which, when you step back and think about it, is a very odd thing to say. But B. Arthur is just a breath of life into this slog of animal noises and padding. Unlike most of the stuff in this, she's funny, she's alive, and she's actually doing something. What's weird is that the segment is presented as a live broadcast from Tatooine that's compulsory viewing for Imperial citizens, and it feels like all this stuff is actually happening in the cantina, but then the Golden Girl starts singing like she's in a musical. It is a pretty fun song that works in the Cantina Band music from A New Hope quite nicely, but also, why is she singing? There are some other humans who add varying levels of life to it. Harvey Korman plays opposite B. Arthur in the Mos Eisley broadcast as a desperate simp, and that's quite funny, but he also appears as a malfunctioning robot who is edited like a YouTube poop. I hate this.
No, this is
But now
great.
let's get started,
This
shall
is
we?
good stuff.
That's great. And a four-armed chef lady who teaches Muller how to cook bantha.
I don't want to jump to any conclusions, but I'm quite comfortable in saying this is the worst thing that I've ever seen in my life.
Art Carney appears as a character called Sawn Dan, who is genuinely the key to all of this. He's a part of the Rebel Alliance and a trader, which a better special would have made a joke about. Of the human characters, he's probably the most prominent. He keeps popping in and out of scenes, and he seems to be the only one who is fully aware of the kind of production he's part of and how to improve it. He's constantly improvising and riffing and joking around in a way that's never incredible, but is always a welcome break from the shite. The film gets better whenever he's around, and he's in it more as it progresses, so it does become slightly easier to watch. I was pleasantly surprised by the end of it that I hadn't hated every second. There are some good moments. The animated section is quite good. It's up on Disney Plus now as its own short film called The Story of the Faithful Wookiee, and I'd recommend watching that at least. It's not spectacular, but it's okay. It famously was the first on-screen appearance of Boba Fett, a fellow who ended up being quite important. And hearing Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, and Mark Hamill voice themselves in a Star Wars animation is kind of surreal. It feels quite authentic, even though C3PO blinks and laughs.
Well, let's get off this galactic raindrop.
The whole thing is an interesting time capsule, showing the idea that people had of Star Wars after just one film. There's this MacGuffin talisman in the cartoon that turns people invisible, that feels so un-Star Wars. And the aesthetic of the Wookiee home is a very 70s idea of futuristic, in a way that the original trilogy never really was. The score is pretty good, I guess. It's not John Williams, but it's mostly working in all his main themes from the original film, and emulating him well enough when not. It's also a time capsule of those original versions of those characters. Mark Hamill, although heavily made up to cover his recent surgery, is playing the cute, upbeat Luke as seen in A New Hope, who was pretty much gone by the time of Empire, and that's actually nice to see more of. And it's just really cool to see them outside of the original movies. They're just vibing, not in the middle of a fast-paced adventure. Han hanging out with Chewie's family is really wholesome. It shows a domestic side of him that is so rare with all the space wars going on, and it makes me want to see more of that side of him with his son. Leia and C3PO even have this bit that feels like Empire Strikes Back humor.
Yes, indeed, ma'am. That's what I'm here for.
She's expressing her warmth towards the trader.
I'm glad you're here to tell us these things. Chewie, take the professor in the back and plug him into the hyperdrive.
That part really does seem to understand the characters, even if it's just one moment, and a short-lived one at that. The whole thing ends as it began, with the deafening screeching of Wookiees, except now there are like 50 of them at a ceremony.
Happy Life Day, everyone.
Then there's a whole series of events that can't be explained. C3PO has a line longing for sentience. Leia sings a song that weaves in the main Star Wars music like it's their theme song. And then Chewbacca seems to have Vietnam-style flashbacks that summarize A New Hope. Again, it has to be seen to be believed. It's interesting how many things that debuted here would go on to become staples of Star Wars. Boba Fett, the general look of Kashyyyk, Din Djarin's blaster, Harrison Ford not wanting to be there. It has quite the appalling reputation among Star Wars fans and just the general public. It's become become a bit of an inside joke that everyone is in on, and it's simultaneously worse than you can possibly imagine and way better than they say. I consider it a must-watch for every Star Wars fan. It never aired again, and it's never been officially released anywhere. I doubt it will make its way onto Disney Plus ever. It's far too atrocious, offensive, porn-heavy, and the bane of George Lucas's existence for that. But it's not too hard to find on the internet. It is impressive that even 40 years later, a search for Star Wars Christmas will get you results dominated by this one-off TV special. It's probably more of a legacy than it was ever intended to have. Chewbacca's family have been canonized in the new continuity, and more elements from this film are being pulled into new stories. One of these elements is Life Day itself, but we'll get back to that. I think it's definitely fair to say that it did not get Star Wars off to the best start when it came to holiday tie-ins. They dipped their toes into the festive water and had them ripped off by Chewie's horny dad. But surprisingly, it was not the last time that seasonal vibes found their way to a galaxy far, far away. In fact, it only took 2 years for it to happen again. In 1977, American musician Miko released Galactic Funk, a collection of space disco remixes of the Star Wars soundtrack. I feel like you've probably heard some of these songs if you're a Star Wars fan, even if you don't know it. It's very fun, but it's not Christmassy, so why am I even talking about it? Well, because it was very popular, and a few years later, after Miko wrote a 9-page letter to George Lucas, he made another album. This one in official collaboration with Lucasfilm, Christmas in the Stars. I have ordered it on eBay, but it hasn't arrived yet, which is annoying because it's got this beautiful cover art by Ralph McQuarrie. It's also annoying because it means I've kind of wasted my money. Just imagine I have it here. It was made in that period of time where people were keen to add some authenticity to their wacky Star Wars projects, but didn't want to pay for the main stars to be involved, so they'd bring in Anthony Daniels as C3PO, the man who would play the character in anything. I like to call this era 1977 to present. After blinking and laughing his way through the holiday special, C3PO is back and sounding more human than ever. Much to my disappointment, he doesn't sing very much. He sings his way through most of it, backed up by vocalists, droids, a choir of 50 schoolchildren, and in one song, John Bon Jovi in his first ever appearance on a record. But there are some moments where our shiny friend attempts to carry the melody, and they're definitely highlights. He's joined by the 2 other main characters who don't need to be voiced by much more than archived sound effects, R2-D2 and Chewbacca. They're in a droid workshop in space making presents for S-Claws and getting excited for the lead up to Christmas. Yes, you've been hearing that right. Christmas. Not Life Day, not unnamed winter festivities, actual legit Noel. And yeah, the real world Christmas elements are strange. George Lucas apparently made it very clear that the galaxy far, far away would have no crossover with the more Christian side of the holiday, probably out of respect for the Force and also Jesus. So a lot of it is just vague stuff about the merry time of year. But even that is bizarre. It's like 2 things that should never come into contact. The guy from A New Hope shouldn't be talking about reindeer or Santa or even December. And on top of the festive references, C3PO mentions Einstein, the discovery of America, and the Magna Carta, as if those are things a robot from space would ever care about. I feel like it was made in the only time in Star Wars history where something like this was possible, and I'm really glad it exists. Sadly, despite good sales and overall popularity, it didn't get a reissue or a follow-up album, thanks to the record company being shut down. Despite being so unique and interesting, it's quite niche. It doesn't have the same notoriety as the holiday special, but I think it's actually pretty good. The original songs remind me of Phineas and Ferb in a good way, and there are also a few rewritten classic carols, and it's all pretty catchy and enjoyable. It definitely understands Star Wars more than the holiday special. Following on from the recently released Empire Strikes Back, it has the running gag about C3PO being obsessed with odds, and this other bit that I really love, where he's telling the story of how he saw Santa Claus one night, and R2-D2 chimes in to lie and say that he was there too, and C3PO's just like, no you weren't. It's cute stuff. There's just something really sincere and sweet about the whole thing. The song, What Can You Get a Wookiee for Christmas When He Already Owns a Comb, speaks for itself. And there's another one where C3PO and the choir are trying to teach R2 how to sing Sleigh Ride, and he adorably whistles his way through that tune. It's also gentle and wholesome. It's only half an hour long, and it's not hard to get hold of. The whole thing is on Spotify now too. While my previous holiday special recommendation was just for the sake of understanding a truly odd piece of Star Wars history, I can recommend this without any caveat because I think it's actually lovely. So stick it on this year, and maybe R2-D2 We Wish You a Merry Christmas will find its way onto your main Christmas playlist, because 2021 is the 3rd year that it's been on mine. I was fascinated by the overt Christmasness of that album, and wondered whether that particular word had been used in anything else, so I turned to Wikipedia and just searched Christmas. Other than Christmas in the Stars, the only real result was something called Return of the Jedi Christmas Special, which obviously piqued my interest, but I could hardly find any information about it online. online. So I bought it. It's a comic from 1983. As you'd imagine, it was released around Christmas time. The bulk of it is just a reprint of a story from 1979 that has absolutely no relation to the holidays. There are also some fan drawings, some behind-the-scenes info on Return of the Jedi, some adverts, including one for the Doctor Who magazine that I very much enjoyed reading, but it was mostly for Star Wars products that they wanted people to buy for Christmas, like annuals and toothbrushes, and a scrapbook that they use gatekeeping to sell. Own up, what so-called Star Wars fan doesn't yet own a Return to the Jedi scrapbook? I don't own a Return to the Jedi scrapbook. I guess I'm not a real fan. My favourite thing is the Star Swaps section. In preparation for Christmas and the possibility that kids would receive toys that they already owned, this page helps them get in touch with other kids who are willing to swap. So if I'd ended up with an extra trenchcoat Han Solo this year, I could have got in touch with Wayne from Stoke-on-Trent and traded it for a snowspeeder. Win-win if you ask me. So it's an interesting oddity, if not a particularly useful entry into the Star Wars festive canon. When it is Christmassy, the focus is more on the overtly commercial side of things, very product-centric, which to be honest is where the focus has been for pretty much every Christmas since. That makes sense. It is an important time of year for the franchise because Star Wars is all about selling toys, and this is the time of year where people will be buying toys, so there's often a big push in marketing around the holidays. Sometimes that's boosted by limited edition holiday-themed products, like decorations, figures, or just Christmassy accessories like stockings or jumpers, or as Americans disgustingly call them, sweaters. There's also the LEGO Star Wars Advent Calendar, a favourite of mine. That gives you a little build to assemble every day, and they've often done exclusive festive figures and models, like Santa Darth Vader, Present Gonk, Christmas Jumper Poe. They also released a Yuletide X-Wing exclusively for LEGO staff members a couple of years ago, and I want one. In recent years, Christmas has brought along an even bigger buzz for Star Wars because it's also been bringing along Star Wars. The sequel trilogy and Rogue One all came out in December, so there was a lot of product advertising alongside all the movie hype. My favourite was Duracell's The Battle for Christmas Morning, which was just quite cute. Lucasfilm often does official holiday artwork, like their yearly Christmas card, which have been going on for years and have had some really nice festive designs by different artists, including some by Ralph McQuarrie himself. As for unofficial Christmassy artwork, there is so much of it. It's often been fans that have kept the connection between the holidays and Star Wars alive, with fan art, fan videos, and even some events. Celebrating Life Day and the holiday special's anniversary has become a Star Wars fandom tradition over the years. I think because of that, it's been commemorated more and more by Lucasfilm and their partners in a number of different ways. It makes perfect sense to maintain the focus on Life Day, really. It means they can bring in exclusive holiday theming to their stories and merchandise without crossing over into Earth and Christian traditions. Something I've been trying to get my hands on is Life Day Treasury, a collection of 8 canon short stories that came out this year. They're all holiday themed and it definitely seems like it's my kind of thing. I'll probably get it next year. I have managed to read a few of the comics about Life Day though. I briefly mentioned the 1979 one that was about Han, C3PO, Chewie and R2 travelling home for another Life Day, but there have been quite a few more. In an issue of Star Wars Adventures last year, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan visit Kashyyyk during Life Day celebrations to meet Qui-Gon's old friend, a Wookiee called Brennon, which is essentially my name. The holiday has pretty much become a direct stand-in for Christmas over the years, with Thanksgiving elements far less common, and unique Wookiee ones even less so. But that comic told a nice little story about the balance of the Force, using the Wookiees' connection to nature on Life Day as a way of teaching Obi-Wan a lesson. And there was a comic this year actually called Life Day. It's mostly set on Batuu, the Galaxy's Edge Disneyland theme park planet, post-Episode 6, but it jumps around a bit to previous Life Days in Han and Chewie's life, and also one in the High Republic era with some Jedi from those stories. It's a fun little comic full of references to the original special and Leia's infamous song, and what ties them all together is the importance of the Life Day orb. It's in all of them, most notably being sold at one of the Batuu stalls. That's corporate synergy right there, because where possible over the last few COVID-y years, Galaxy's Edge has had Life Day events, with special food and merchandise available, as well as unofficial parades, caroling, and reenactments of the vague orb ceremony that we saw in the special. I think Chewie himself even showed up to one. I hope they still sell those orbs when I go to Galaxy's Edge because I want one. Fans have also come together to celebrate Life Day in the video games, with events in both Star Wars Galaxies and the Old Republic. And the holiday got name-dropped in the first episode of The Mandalorian, bringing things full circle with that Boba-inspired design and blaster for the central character. The LEGO cartoons have made a few winking references to Life Day over the years, but they did it most prominently last year with the LEGO Star Wars Holiday Special, a 50-minute film they released on Disney+. Although non-canon, it's one of the first and only post-Rise of Skywalker stories that they've told. The main plot is a Jedi narrative about Finn's insecurity with the Force and Rey's insecurity as a teacher that quickly leads to a big time travel crossover where all eras collide. I like that LEGO is able to do these things without the normal restraints of canon, like this stuff here.
What does it open?
I mean, where else would you be able to see a character wave their hand in a circular motion while holding a magic artifact and open a portal gateway behind them that leads to an iconic and beloved character from the series past? I was proud of myself for that one. But no, it really is fun. The whole thing is a love letter to the entire Star Wars saga, and the original holiday special. Because the secondary story is all about Life Day. We see the rest of the gang getting the Millennium Falcon ready for a party, and trying to entertain Chewie's family. Yes, the Chewie's family. Itchy, Lumpy, and Mala. They even bring back the original awful sound effects for their voices. The contrast in stakes between the A plot and the B plot is really funny. Going from the galaxy-threatening moment of Palpatine taking control of a time travel artifact to Max Rebo setting up on the Falcon gives you a bit of whiplash, but I'd be lying if I said those parts weren't my favourite. Poe wears a Christmas jumper throughout, Vader gives the Emperor a mug as a Life Day gift, we get a bit of Reylo, and Rose Tico sings a song with Finn, in Huttese. Genuinely, what more could you want? The whole thing is really sweet and funny, but honestly, the thing that makes me the happiest is just the fact that it exists. I love when Star Wars is festive, and it's great to see that side of the saga celebrated, even the parts that were initially hated. With all the recent Life Day content and the continued release of Christmassy products, I just have to hope that Lucasfilm will keep embracing the connection Star Wars has with the holidays, because that connection is almost as old as Star Wars itself. So bring on more comics, more Lego, more specials. Do a live action one. The Guardians of the Galaxy are getting a holiday special soon. That's the kind of thing I'd love to see from Star Wars again. They're doing so much Star Wars television right now. Why not have an episode centered around Life Day next Christmas? Failing that, let's have a Christmas in the Stars follow-up album. That little orange round robot could do an excellent Silent Night. He'd leave us all saying, wow, BB-8. I'm sorry. I'm not quite sure how to wrap up this video beyond just saying that I really like this stuff and I want to see more of it. Also, I hope you all consider the 28th of December to still be Christmas because editing this thing was a nightmare. Thank you so much for watching. I've had a blast looking back through all this festive Star Wars goodness, and I hope you have too. If you have, leave a like, share, comment, subscribe, check out my Twitter and my podcast and all the other great things in the description. I guess all that's left to say is Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, may the Force be with you, see you next year, love you lots.